All right, so might as well get this started. I'm going to talk today about libvirt and bhyve, and I'm Craig Rodrigues. I'm a FreeBSD developer. I work on the release engineering team, and I also work here at IX Systems in San Jose on FreeNAS. And I attended BSDCan in Ottawa in May, and I led a working group there on Jenkins and testing and stuff like that, and basically stuff I talked about before a couple months ago at BAFUG. Talked about at BSDCan, and there's a lot of interest in testing and stuff like that, and this is kind of related to that. So I just wanted to talk about some stuff that I have been looking into in the past month or so, and what I found. So I'll talk about libvirt a little bit. So what is it? So it's an open source project. You can go to libvirt.org and look at the code, look at the documentation and stuff like that. It is supported by Red Hat. It is called like a Red Hat emerging technology. So it's kind of a sort of a technology that is supported by Red Hat. So it's a toolkit to interact with different hypervisors. So KVM, Xen, LXC, OpenVZ, user mode Linux, VirtualBox, VMware ESX, Hyper-V parallels, and recently bhyve support has been added. And so it is a C library, but it has bindings for other languages. Python, Ruby, Java, C#, OCaml, whatever that is, Perl, PHP. So why do I care about this? So the thing is that it is used by many third-party applications, and these days a lot of people who are doing automation work, cloud work, stuff like that, they tend to like to use different toolkits and APIs for interacting with hypervisors and virtual machines and stuff like that, so that you can have some code that uses, say, Xen, and then not have to rewrite all the code to switch to like KVM. So that's why I care about it, because I like bhyve, but I don't care about bhyve more than I care about Hyper-V or anything like that. So this is a diagram that I borrowed from the internet. So this is the link is below, but basically this is the architecture. So kind of at the top you have user space tools. So you have virt, which is a command line shell, and virt-manager, which is a GUI, virt viewer. Then you have a daemon called libvirt-d, and then libvirt-d then talks to the various hypervisors. So this diagram has Xen, KVM, QEMU, and bhyve is also supported now. So libvirt and bhyve. So who did this work? So there's a guy, I've never met him, but he's in Russia, and I always have to make sure that I don't misspell his name. But his name is Roman Bogorodsky, and he is a novel at freebsd.org. So what this guy has done is really cool, because he has added support to libvirt for bhyve, but instead of keeping the code off to the side and only making it available to FreeBSD developers, he's actually been quite aggressive about pushing the code back to the libvirt repository maintained by Red Hat at libvirt.org. So the libvirt.org, they have a Git repository, and he's been pushing code there, and that's really, really nice, because if it's maintained off to the side, then that is always a pain in the neck when the upstream library changes. So he's been doing that. So how do you install this stuff? So I have been testing out this stuff in the past month or so, and I found a lot of rough edges. So I started being a real pest and saying, hey, this doesn't work, this doesn't work, this doesn't work, this doesn't work. And Roman actually responded to all my emails, which is kind of cool. And so there is a FreeBSD port for this libvirt. So that makes it easier if you're using FreeBSD. So what I am trying to do is I'm trying to push to make this as usable as possible out of the box, so that you don't even have to build this from ports. You can install it from a package. But some patches for libvirt to make it usable with bhyve just got committed like yesterday. So you need to build the port from the ports tree. So if you're familiar with updating ports, you can use port snap or whatever the heck you want. You can check it out from Subversion, but I use port snap, so I do port snap fetch, port snap update, and then that pulls in all the ports tree under the user ports directory. And then to build it, you go to user ports, devel libvirt, make install, and then that installs it for you. And then hopefully in the future you'll just be able to do package install devel libvirt. But if you do package install devel libvirt today, you'll get a version of libvirt that is completely unusable. So don't do that. Update your ports tree and build this thing yourself. So what do you do? How do you run this stuff? So to run the code, so after you've installed the port, you customize libvirt-d.conf, and then you start a daemon called libvirt-d. Then you edit a config file, which is an XML format, with the information about your bhyve VM, and then you run the commands from the virt shell to start the VM. And so I wrote some more detailed let's see if that works. Okay, I wrote some more detailed instructions, so I found some things that I had to do on the machine that I had to disable something called unbound, which is it's like a DNS replacement for bind. Then I was also doing some fiddling around with autobridge and bridging, so I had to disable that. But if you're not screwing around with that, then you don't have to worry about that. And I had to stop unbound. The other thing that I found is that the libvirt port has a dependency on DNS mask. So when I was messing with an earlier version of the port, I was trying to run the port, and then I was getting these weird errors, and then Roman said, do you have DNS mask installed? I'm like, what the hell do I need DNS mask for? I'm trying to run a library to start VMs. And he said, no, you need this thing. So I was like, yeah, whatever, okay. So the latest version of the port has the dependency. So if you build or install the port, it will install DNS mask if you don't have it. So what is DNS mask? So DNS mask is kind of like a small little daemon that resolves DNS. So it allows your VMs to query this daemon and get an IP address from the daemon. So you can add some things to libvirt-d.conf. Out of the box, it's generally okay. The only thing I found is that you can change the log level. So I added log level 2. And then this config file is an XML format, and it's like, whoa, where did this come from? So there's an example of this on libvirt.org submitted by Roman. But basically, you specify some things like the number of CPUs, the memory of the VM, you specify the file name of the disk image for the VM. So if you have a VM that you start in bhyve, then you do that. Then you specify some of the networking. So the libvirt-d, it creates a bridging interface called virt-manager. So you have to put this in here. Otherwise, things just fall apart. I said, oh, I'll just put tap 0 in here. And I did that. That didn't work at all. You need to put virt-manager. And Roman also added some stuff. So like the bhyve developers added something. Oh, there's a typo here. There should be a quotation mark there. But Roman added a feature so that the bhyve developers added something where they use the null modem device dev nmdm so that you can get a serial console to a bhyve VM using this device. And so Roman has added something where you can actually configure that through this XML file. So you basically add all these parameters. This thing here has to point to a valid image that can boot in bhyve. And then you start libvirt-d. So libvirt-d will then read the libvirt-d.conf, which is not this XML thing. So libvirt-d.conf looks like this config file. So there's like basically name value pairs. So there's a bunch of stuff in here. I have not messed with any of this stuff normally, but the only thing I set was log level. So I uncommented log level and I changed that to 2 because when you're setting this up for the first time and you don't know what's going on, you really need logs. And so after you start libvirt-d, you'll see a device, this virt-manager, virtual bridge. And then once that's all set up, then you can run these commands from the command line. So you run virsh -c, and then every sort of hypervisor has a different URL syntax. So this is the URL syntax for bhyve. So the first command, what this does, define bhyve temp bhyve XML. This loads the XML file with your VM configuration, and then it makes it available. Then the second command, you can say either you need this thing, virsh -c, and then the URL. Then for this one, you could either say start bhyve, or you can say start -- console bhyve. And -- console, you can actually see the console of the VM, assuming you have that nmdm configured in the XML. And then so after jumping through all these hoops, if you got all this stuff right, then this will actually work. But I'm not going to demo this because I'm not going to press my luck. So then, okay, well, what the heck? So I did all that stupid stuff and I started a VM, but what's the point? I can write a script that can start a VM and it'll probably be easier. But the whole point is that now you have all this ecosystem of stuff that you can use that uses libvirt and can now start bhyve VMs. So here's one example. There's a thing called py-libvirt. So I'm more like Python person, but you know, if you like Ruby or whatever, there's bindings in libvirt. And luckily this stuff is in ports. So user ports devel py-libvirt. You know, you can install this by building the port or installing it by packages, and it just works. So then here's some Python code. So you basically, this code is very, very simple. It doesn't really do anything too interesting. but you can also make code that like starts VMs. I didn't write an example. This is one of my examples just to verify that things worked. All this does is, if I already started a bhyve VM outside of this Python example, like if I use that virt syntax, what this code will basically say is it'll print out like some information about the running VM, and that's it. But there's other examples. You can, for running VMs, you can query information of the VM through libvirt. You can stop and start VMs, and that's useful. But I don't have the code for that. But if you look for py-libvirt, you can find code examples. And virt-manager. So what's that? So virt-manager, it's a GUI application for interacting with libvirt. And it is written in Python, and it uses the GTK bindings for the GUI. And it is also available in ports, user ports, deskutils, virt-manager. However, what is in ports right now will not work with bhyve unless you patch it. So I have a patch at this link. And by the way, I'll make these slides available later online. I'll put a link on the meetup site. So I'm like trying to be a pest again and talk to the port maintainer. Hey, you know, this stuff is not usable, blah, 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 unless you use this patch. Please take this patch. But when you, and the patch is very small, but once you patch it, then you get something like this. So you get a little cute little GUI that you can actually, so you have to jump through all the hoops before, set up the libvirt.conf, set up the XML, do all that stuff. But then you can actually start and stop things through this GUI. You get a little thing here, CPU usage. Maybe that's not 100% useful, but it looks cool, which, you know, that counts for something. So yeah, but you get a nice little GUI, and yeah, it kind of works. So that's kind of nice. And so this is the stuff that I'm really interested in, Jenkins and libvirt. So with Jenkins, so Jenkins is the continuous build and integration framework. I talked about it at a BAFUG meeting a few months ago. So there's a plugin architecture for Jenkins that you can download, something called libvirt slaves plugin. And what this does, it allows VMs to be created on demand in response to build jobs and then shut down after jobs are complete. And this is like super useful for a lot of things. So this is really why I was interested in getting some of this stuff to work. virt-manager is cute, but not interesting to me, really. So this is the UI for Jenkins. So it's a web-based UI. And so what you do in the Jenkins web UI, you go to manage Jenkins, manage plugins, then you look for all the available plugins, and then you install libvirt slaves plugin. And then once you install the libvirt slaves plugin, then you have to add a user that can SSH into the VM. And you have to set up the user and make sure it has a SSH authorized key and all that usual fun Unix stuff that you have to get SSH to work. And then you go to the Jenkins UI, you go to Manage Jenkins, Configure System, Cloud, add a new cloud, and then you enter information which allows you to SSH into the machine, into the. So you have to add information that allows the Jenkins to SSH to the machine running libvirt, because the Jenkins has to execute commands against libvirt using virt. So it has to SSH into the host running libvirt and SSH and then run these commands. And so then the command you enter is this one, virt-c bhyve plus SSH, blah, 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 root at localhost system. And so it looks like this. You enter all these parameters here, and then when you click this button here called test connection, then this little text will appear, OK, bhyve plus SSH, blah, 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 blah. And so this is like just making sure it can connect to libvirt. So now if that works, then you want to be able to say, okay, so now I want to create a node, which is a something that a job can run on. And so what you do is you go to Manage Jenkins, Manage Nodes, create a new node, and then the type of the node is a slave virtual computer running on a virtualization platform via libvirt. So like this. And then you can click OK. Then you enter some information about the node. And so you enter libvirt node, and then you enter this hypervisor thing, which you entered before, and then bhyve. And then a lot of these parameters are default. But you can do things like number of executors is the number of build jobs you can run on the node at the same time. And for my testing purposes, I just did one. And then you can say where is the remote file system of where the build jobs will run. And then, so the only thing that I found weird is that you need to put the IP address of the, so this is the IP address of the VM itself. So I had some discussion with Romana, and I said, how the heck do I know what the IP address is of the VM if I haven't even started it yet? And what he basically told me is that, so in bhyve, you can configure the MAC address of the VM before starting the VM. So you basically need to have your setup with DNS mask and stuff set so that it will bind a particular IP address to a particular MAC address. So you kind of need to know some stuff. But basically, at this point, what this allows you to do is, this allows Jenkins to SSH into the VM that it started. So there's two things that go on. One is Jenkins has to communicate with libvirt, and then it tells libvirt, start the VM. Then the VM starts. And then now you have this information. And then this information is the information about the VM itself. And so then Jenkins can SSH into that VM that has started and then execute commands on that VM. So it can run, it can build software, it can run tests, it can do whatever. And so now you want to create a build job. So you go to new item, build a freestyle software project, and click on that there. And then now you want to restrict where the job can be run. So you restrict the job to libvirt node, which is what you created. And then you can do whatever the heck you want here. You can add build steps, check out code, whatever. And that's pretty much how that works. So it's kind of, it's rough. It's rough around the edges. Definitely rough around the edges, but it's getting there. And the thing is that in the Linux world, people already do this all the time with KVM, Zen, and they use it quite heavily. So if this matures to the point where it's usable with all these third-party applications, that is like super useful. Because bhyve itself is very useful, but people need to do more than just start a VM. They need to, have it run and integrate with other things. And there's just a lot of code out there that is written for these other things like KVM and Zen, and a lot of things built on top of libvirt. So it's very useful to be able to take advantage of this. So I'd like to thank Roman, he did an awesome job. I mean, I was like, wow. He wrote a lot of code and he pushed it upstream, which I was amazed because FreeBSD is not always the popular thing, and especially with these very Linux-centric projects, maintained by Red Hat and all that kind of stuff. But he's managed to do it. He's managed to push the code up, and it was rough around the edges, but I tried it out and had some problems, and he responded, and we worked together. I submitted some patches, he submitted some patches, and then the person, so he wrote the code, but he doesn't maintain the port. So there's another person, Jason Helfman, he maintains the port. So he's been good about taking patches. And so with these people working on it, it's really improving. And so what I need is, honestly, if more people can try this stuff out and report bugs to FreeBSD virtualization at freebsd.org mailing list, and honestly just kick these people in the behind so that this stuff is more usable. Because if there's only one person using it, then this stuff is not going to go anywhere. But if there's more people using it and beating on it, it's a little bit rough, but it's getting better, and it's pretty good. The other thing is that if there's people who are interested in the libvirt API itself, I think that there are some things that are missing for bhyve. So things for stopping and starting VMs and getting some information. I think some of that stuff needs to be polished up a bit. So one of the nice things about virt-manager, that GUI application, is you can start it and you can click buttons on it, and then right away you'll find out, oh, you'll click like the stop button and then it'll say operation not supported. So like people who are interested in implementing those parts of the libvirt API for bhyve, I mean, I don't have the bandwidth to do that, but that would be pretty cool. So there's some C coding involved, and if you're into any of the scripting languages like Python, Ruby, or even Java, there's a lot of tools and things you can use. So basically, just getting more people involved and banging on this stuff will be very helpful.